Hi, Gloriana. How you doing? Thank you so much for including your work here. This is interesting that this comment right here, I try to create a connection with peace, balance, and justice. And I think those terms really encapsulate the work and philosophies and beliefs of Rigoberto Menchú, your, um, your chosen laureate. So I think those are some really interesting conceptual and some very meaningful ties that you're making there. Now, in your writing, you specifically indicated that you're going to, in this concept, that you were going to connect those that meaning using the holly wreath. And I think that the holly wreath means a lot, but I think a lot it has to do with victory. And I'm not so sure that how do I say this? A laurel wreath and a holly wreath are very much close to the same thing. But if we call this a laurel wreath, I think that we kind of have this really neat way of saying a symbol of eternal glory, of special achievement, of success and triumph, as opposed to general victory, where holly kind of symbolizes general victory, whereas a laurel wreath, though they look identical, a laurel wreath is more associated in symbolism with eternal glory, special achievement, specific achievement, success, and triumph in any specific endeavor. So let's call it a laurel. Let's call it a laurel wreath. And I know I'm on a tangent there, but I just wanted to make that specifically clear. Okay, so using the laurel wreath to indicate peace, balance, and justice, and as it represents Rigoberto Menchú's life work, I think is a really good concept, and I think it's going to work. Let's jump over to the work, shall we, Gloriana? I've got your post right up here, and first thing I need to do is get this resized and in to the window. I'm going to reduce this size a little bit here so we can see it. Okay, you know what? I want to check something really quick because I want to download this because I'm looking at the size and I just want to check the size. It's 11 by 17, right? But let's go ahead and do this really quick so we can check that. Here we go. This should just take 1 second and it should open as a PDF. And of course we can see 17 by 11. So excellent, good job there. For some reason it didn't, the dimensions didn't look right to me, but it is, so excellent. Okay, so here's your laurel wreath. I think that's a really good job. I think you're making some really great connections here. I've got a couple of questions. What is the significance of color in this particular case? I think that's something that's really important to consider. As everything in graphic design, everything that is seen on the paper should in the composition should have a reason for being there. Any mark on the page should be able to be described. And quite honestly, when you are sorry about that. As I was saying, quite honestly, when you are in a situation where your portfolio is being reviewed by a portfolio reviewer, and especially in forthcoming days when you are going to be sitting in front of a prospective hiring professional, you're going to get asked questions about your work and you have to have answers. So whenever you design, you really, and it's a great professional practice to have a reason for everything and be able to define that reason readily. So for example, if you're sitting in front of me and I'm a hiring professional and I'm interested in hiring you as an intern or a designer for my firm, I would sit down, we would look at this piece and I'd say, okay, Gloriana, can you explain your use of color here? And if you don't have an answer, that's going to be problematic. Okay, so I want you to think about and be able to describe your use of color here as it relates and reflects the concept. Okay, now let's take a look at the actual composition. This is interesting. This left align is interesting, but again, is there a reason for it? My main thing with this is I like the relationship. I like the relationship of the serif here and the sans serif lowercase here. I think that's interesting. Again, another question to contemplate. What is the reasoning for not capitalizing the first letters in her name? Okay, so think about that. So this is a good relationship. I think the size relationship is interesting, and I think that the actual font, the fonts work well together. Now, one thing I would recommend is this is reversed type. Okay, meaning the traditional type is typically a dark colored font on a dark colored type on a light colored background. Reversed refers to a light colored type on a darker background, as we see here. Now, one of the problems or one of the issues that we have with reversed type is you always want to go in there and increase the tracking. This is fine. You're kerned just perfectly here. I think you're just fine, although I will talk about kerning in a second here. But the whole tracking for this needs to be opened up a little bit. Justice for the indigenous people. That seems like somewhat of an incomplete thought. So I would say justice for the indigenous people, and then down to the second line of Guatemala. Now we're going to tie things together. So as far as the kerning in the individual piece, the individual letters in her name, I think that Manchu looks good. I think right now I am thinking B-E. That's a little tight right there. Just a little tight right through here, here, and here, and maybe even right here. And we want to open that up just so it's very, very, very consistent with the open kerning here on Manchu. Okay, so think about that. The other thing is that this is dead center. Even though it's right aligned, it's dead center, which means what? You should be able to rattle this off the top of your head. Dead center, center composition means you're not effectively activating the negative space associated with the composition. So my initial, and just looking and again, this is your concept, so it's your ideas, right? But just looking at this, I think it might be a little more effective, be a little bit more effective to right align this, okay, and pull it down and do something other than center aligned. Think of rule of thirds. Think of your interesting portions. I'm particularly fond of this quadrant right here, and I'm thinking maybe something like this might be a little more interesting and really activate that negative space and create some interesting relationships between the type and the composition itself. Okay, so the other thing is that the leading, I think that this leading is really tight. I'm sorry, excuse me. I think this leading is really loose here. Leading, of course, is the space between lines of type. And I think one of the reasons is the accent that's placed over you is should that be above the center of the U, or should it be over here? I'm not sure if it's supposed to be. Actually, you know what? I'm just looking at something now. I just realized something, and let me just grab something here. I want to show you something really quick. Just notice this. But the reason I'm saying that is because that little accent right there kind of is precluding you from being able to bring the first and last name closer together. I think that they should be a little bit closer together, but I can certainly understand this trying to interfere with that A. So think about that. If that's the correct placement of that accent, just move it up a little bit. You got a little bit of room to go here. If not, we can bring it over here, and that would be considered hanging punctuation, meaning that this vertical stem of the U would be aligned with this vertical stem of the A. Now that brings me to my point of why I went out and grabbed this straight edge, because if you're truly left aligned here, these are not in alignment. We can see that as we see there's the U right there, and there's the A. We want to look at it from the other way. There's the A, there's the U. So we can see that we're not in true alignment. And it looks like the subhead is aligned with the A. So think about that. Okay. I think that's about all I have. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and of course, clarifications, please let me know. If you want to work on these comments, if you want to kind of address some of my comments, please have at it and feel free to repost, at which time I'll be glad to provide another critique. But let me know, when you post, let me know what is your reasoning behind your use of colors? What is your reasoning behind your typeface choices? What is the reasoning behind your placement and your alignment, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, so all right, so right now, again, of course, the most important thing, Gloriana, is to let me know if you have any questions or if I can clarify anything that I've said in the last 10 minutes or so. Fantastic start, really, really interesting conceptual development here. So Okay, any questions, please let me know. Great start. Thank you very much.